Good morning, everyone. My name is Henley McCann, and I am one of the Outreach Education Coordinators here at the Montgomery County Women's Center. Today's Coffee Talk topic is going to be about sexual assault and special populations. So we are the Montgomery County Women's Center, and a little bit about our services that we offer. We have our emergency shelter that can be accessed 24/7. We also have our crisis hotline. So our crisis hotline can be found on the bottom of this page. For anybody that is needing access to our emergency shelter, they would call our hotline and we would have somebody that would answer the phone and help them through that process. We also have our advocacy team. So we respond 24/7 to surrounding hospitals, as well as police stations. We do court accompaniments, and our advocates provide that one-on-one support to the victims and their families, either going through the sexual assault exam, going through those forensic interviews, things like that, kind of helping them along the process, letting them know what their rights are, what their options are, and helping them along the way. We also have our legal team. We are staffed with 3 legal attorneys, and they help with any family law matters such as divorce, child custody, protective orders, things like that. And again, these resources are completely free. We also have our counseling and support groups. And again, our counseling is free as well. It can be for children, women, men, adults. Counseling is offered really to anybody who has been or is a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault. We also have our transitional housing program. This is a 2 to 4 year program, and we do have a 24 unit apartment complex next door to us at our Conroe office. And this is solely for women and children. All of our other services can be offered to males as well, but this is our only service that is specifically for women and children. And this is for anybody that is out of that imminent danger. They have their own vehicle, they are working a job, and we're able to help them maybe go back to school, kind of live that violence-free, independent life. And then we also have our education and community outreach team, which is myself as well as my team. And what we do is we go into the schools, we go into churches, businesses, community partners, community agencies, and we talk about the dynamics of domestic violence, sexual assault, what to look out for. But also when we go into the schools, it's really important that we break that cycle and go in and prevent anybody from either going into an unhealthy relationship or really just learning the dynamics of a healthy versus unhealthy relationship. So we'll talk about boundaries, consent, we'll even talk about feelings and emotions, things to look out for. So if you're ever interested in any of our presentations and trainings, you can always contact us at outreach@mcwctx.org. You can book a presentation. And again, all of our trainings and presentations are completely free. So with that community education and outreach piece, we have been providing coffee talks throughout the month of April on different topics regarding sexual assault, since April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So today's topic, we're really going to be focusing on the special populations who have experienced sexual assault. So getting started, we're going to talk about sexual assault in males. So when we talk about special populations, these are the populations that a lot of the times the sexual assaults go unreported. Maybe they just don't even disclose that they've been sexually assaulted because of the stigma maybe around them being victims of domestic violence or sexual assault. Well, but again, we're really focusing today on the sexual assault. So when talking about males, 1 in 6 men have experienced sexual abuse or assault. And this statement right under here says this is probably even underestimated because males who have such experiences are less likely to disclose them than females. And again, this is most likely an underestimated statistic. There's probably a lot more males that have been victims of sexual assault. Because again, the statistic is only of what is reported, and many assaults within this population go unreported. And what we know about sexual assault is that anybody can be the perpetrator and anybody can be the victim. It does not have to look a certain way. However, society and our culture around sexual assault portray the females as the victim and males as the perpetrators. But what we know is that anybody can be a victim of sexual assault. You do not have to look a certain way. You do not have to be a certain race, age, gender, social status. Anybody can be a victim of sexual assault. And male victims, they're very reluctant to report and seek services, and there's a lot of reasons why. So I'm going to talk about some of those reasons why there might be the underreporting with the male population. So there's a fear that they might be judged. Maybe they want to protect their family against the societal scrutiny against being a victim. There's also intense feelings of shame, guilt, or humiliation. And again, this is kind of back to what Linda talked about last week with our coffee talk on rape culture and the certain things that society we actually perpetuate rape culture with things like that, making certain jokes, making certain comments, things like that. All of that starts and that can build and escalate into what we see then maybe the sexual assault occurring or the violence occurring. Maybe confusion if that male was physically aroused. But what we know too is that all of that arousal or things that may happen when the sexual assault is occurring, those are human natural responses to the body's reaction. It does not mean that that person liked it. It also does not mean that that person gave consent, because if that person did not clearly give a yes to whatever was occurring, then that person did not give consent and that was a sexual assault. Also, the stigma associated with the stereotypes that males are not victims. And again, that is all perpetuating that rape culture that we'll see in our society. Also, they may be unsure of available services or if services are available for males. Now, if you think about it too, all of our services here at the Montgomery County Women's Center, we do offer to males, but even in our name, the Montgomery County Women's Center, a lot of the times we will see males that won't think that those services are offered to them. And I can see why, right? We see that even in the name it says Women's Center, but we do help men. So a lot of the times men do not know what services are available to them, or even if services are. And again, this is because maybe in the name, or maybe just again how we're perpetuating that society that females are most likely the victims and males are most likely the perpetrators. Now, yes, statistically speaking, that's a lot of what we see, majority. But again, we also want to make sure that we are bringing light and shedding light onto the fact that males can be victims as well. Also, the fear of being outed if this male is gay, bisexual, or transgender. And also, perpetrators often use the victim's feelings of confusion and shame to maintain the control and discourage reporting the crime. When we talk about sexual assault, and we broke down this in the myths versus facts coffee talk, but when we talk about sexual assault, a lot of the times we think that it's about that person wanting or desiring sex, but actually when we see sexual assaults occurring, that person is trying to maintain or gain power and control over the other person. And it's a very intimate way of doing that. And it's a very close way of doing that. I mean, that's a very, intimate way of doing that to somebody. But that's a way that person can have that power and control. So the perpetrator knows that that's what they're doing. They're trying to have that power and control over the other person. So what we'll see is maybe they're trying to shame that person or discourage them from reporting the crime. So the next population group that we're going to talk about is our LGBTQ plus community. So I'm going to read off some statistics that you can see on the screen, but the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Projects estimates that nearly 1 in 10 LGBTQ plus survivors of intimate partner violence has experienced sexual assault from these partners. And again, when talking about these special populations and knowing that they're special populations, this is also, again, only what's reported. So many of the sexual assault against these population groups go unreported. And again, 1 in 4 bisexual women experience sexual violence. 1 in 2 bisexual men experience sexual violence. 1 in 2 transgender folk are sexually assaulted. 1 in 8 lesbian women are sexually assaulted, and 2 in 5 gay men are sexually abused. Within the LGBTQ plus community, transgender folk and bisexual women face the most alarming rates of sexual violence. One of the main barriers facing LGBTQ plus individuals is that even if they want help, they may be reluctant to disclose their sexual orientation or gender identity to service providers when that disclosure may mean facing future discrimination or denial of services. So some LGBTQ plus survivors may also be reluctant to report because they fear that it will reflect badly on their community, or for fear that they may be unjustly labeled as the perpetrator. Homo, bi, and transphobia, the fear or hatred of lesbian, gay, and bisexual and transgender people, keeps many survivors from reporting the assault as well and seeking services. One of the most persistent myths about sexual assault, which is that a sexual act and not an act of power or dominance, is particularly damaging to a survivor because it becomes intertwined with homo, bi, and transphobia. And again, for individuals within the LGBTQ plus community, and if they've experienced sexual assault, is the fear of being outed, especially if they have not disclosed to others their sexual orientation and gender identity. And we'll see this a lot with our teens. Maybe they have not disclosed their gender identity or sexual orientation. And we'll see that in that relationship, maybe that perpetrator or abuser is trying to keep that power and control in that relationship by telling that individual, well, if you leave me, I'm going to tell your family that you are fill in the blank. And again, this will even keep somebody in maybe that abusive or unhealthy relationship because they fear being outed to their community, to their family, to their friends, if they have not disclosed that already. This is also the power and control wheel that we'll see for LGBTQ plus relationships. So in the center, you'll see power and control, and around it, you'll see all of the different tactics used in that relationship that person might use to maintain or gain power and control over the other. And you'll see maybe there might be experiencing some physical violence or sexual violence because of that power and control. So there are different power and control wheels. There's power and control wheels for teens, there's power and control wheels for elderly, there's power and control wheels for veterans. So if you look up the different types of power and control wheels, you can see the different ways that somebody in that relationship might have that power and control. So this is just what we'll see for LGBTQ plus relationships. And then also sexual assault in the elder population. So at least 1 out of 10 adults over the age of 65 suffer from at least one type of abuse each year. And this is according to the U.S. Department of Justice. Sexual abuse remains the least reported type of elder abuse, and this is according to the data from the Department of Justice as well as the World Health Organization. So back to the previous statistic, when we talk about 1 in 10 adults over 65 suffer from at least one type of abuse, the different types of abuse that we're talking about are sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental, verbal, emotional abuse, financial abuse, spiritual abuse. So out of all of those different types of abuse, 1 out of 10 have at least experienced one type of those. And of those different types, sexual abuse remains the least reported. Only about 30% of elder victims of sexual abuse over the age of 65 actually report the abuse to the authorities. 67% of elder sexual abusers were members of the family. Now, this is a very important statistic because when we talk about sexual assault and the stigmas around sexual assault, and Linda talked about this with rape culture, a lot of the times, not even a lot, most of the time, sexual assaults occur by the person known to that victim, whether it be a family member, a friend, an acquaintance, a dating partner. We see that the people closest to that individual, to that victim, are the ones that are perpetuating that sexual assault. So 67% of the sexual abusers against elders were members of their family. 80% of the time, the perpetrator of elder sexual abuse was the caregiver to the elder. So again, there are a lot of reasons why elders may not report this. And maybe it's because they're unable to report, maybe due to physical or mental abilities. Depending on the abuser's care and basic needs, maybe there's a fear or retaliation from the abuser, fearing that reporting the abuse will end them with being placed in an institution. This is especially true if maybe the abuser is a caretaker at their home or one of the members of their family, and they're using the threat of, well, if you report this or if you say something, then you're going to end up in a care facility or you're going to end up in a nursing home. They may feel ashamed to tell someone that a loved one is hurting them or taking advantage of them. They may have concerns that the report will get the abuser in trouble, and this can especially be true if the abuser is someone that the elder is close to or cares about. And then there's also times when sexual abuse or sexual assault is reported, but it isn't taken seriously because of that victim's age or assumptions about their mental capabilities. So again, these are all just some of the reasons that elders may not report sexual assault or sexual abuse. And again, with all of these special populations, this is a very brief overview, but there's so many more reasons that we can talk about. If there's any questions that you may have, that you can reach out to, services and community resources that you can reach out to. But these are just some of the barriers that we'll see that keep these populations from reporting or talking to authorities or really just reaching out for help. And then the last group that we're going to talk about is sexual assault of individuals with disabilities. So people with disabilities are more than 3 times as likely than non-disabled people to experience serious violent crimes such as rape and sexual assault. Having multiple disabilities can increase a person's risk of rape and sexual assault, and children with mental health or intellectual disabilities are almost 5 times more likely than their non-disabled peers to experience sexual abuse. Women with a disability are at a greater risk of experiencing rape than women without. An estimated 2 in 5 female victims of rape had a disability at the time of the rape. Nearly 1 in 4 male victims who have experienced sexual violence other than rape had a disability at the time of the victimization. So now for both women and men, having a disability was associated with an increased risk of sexual coercion. So this is a pressure for sex without physical force, and non-contact unwanted sexual experiences, which can include harassed in public place, made to participate in or view sexually explicit material, etc. Now, with individuals with disabilities, it's really important that we remember too that we're really just shedding light. Really, I mean, with individuals with disabilities and the other populations we talked about, this is really just shedding light onto the subject that these individuals are experiencing sexual assault, sometimes at a higher rate and a higher risk of experiencing sexual violence. So it's really important that we're talking about this for Sexual Assault Awareness Month and really just shedding light on these individuals and these groups of people because they are experiencing this as well. It's not something that we'll see only certain people of an orientation or gender or age status are experiencing, but actually these individuals are experiencing it probably at more of a risk and at a higher rate than those that are not a part of these groups or communities. The myths people believe about the sexuality and autonomy of disabled people fuel these assaults. These myths can include believing that a disability means an inability to participate equally in an intimate relationship, and assuming that disabled people cannot control their urges, among many others. However, society and the media fail to provide an accurate representation of people with disabilities, which results in misinformation, including about the types of relationships that people with disabilities have. And what we'll see is that all of these myths and trends contribute to a culture in which people with disabilities are more likely to face sexual violence and often targeted because of their disabilities, and are, again, often not believed because of their disabilities. So what we see around, and why it's important that we talk about rape culture and what culture we have around the attitudes and the norms that we have around sexual abuse or sexual violence and rape, we need to break these myths down because ultimately it is affecting these populations and these groups of individuals. And again, how we're talking about sexual assault and bringing light to these things is ultimately breaking down these stigmas that we have, these stereotypes that we have, in order to better help now these victims of sexual assault, with those with disabilities, the LGBTQ plus community, elderly, and male victims as well, because all of these groups of individuals are victims as well. So that was just, again, a very brief and broad overview and kind of just shedding light onto the fact that there are these groups of people that are experiencing sexual assault. And again, we might not have all the information because there is a stigma around reporting. They don't feel believed. Maybe they'll feel judged. So if at any time, or if any of this sparks maybe somebody that you know, or maybe someone within your family, or maybe even yourself, and you want some help, or you want some resources and what to do, where to go from here, these are some great websites. So our website's up top. 1 in 6, that's a website for male survivors. Love is Respect. That's a website for anybody that's a victim or survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault. It talks about healthy relationships and the dynamic of a healthy relationship, as well as what are some unhealthy relationships and signs to look out for in an unhealthy relationship. And then Forge Forward is for anyone that's been a survivor within the LGBTQ plus community. We also have local crisis centers, so that's our center with our crisis hotline and shelter. That's the number that you can access those services. And then as well on the right-hand side, you'll see other hotlines. So we have the National Domestic Violence Hotline, the Child Abuse Hotline, the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network Hotline. We have an Anti-Violence Project Hotline, as well as the Texas Department of Family Services, because it's important that you actually have this number and are familiar with this number, because this is how you would report any abuse. If anybody has disclosed any abuse for anybody that is an elder, that is over the age of 65, as well as anybody with a disability, as well as children. So this is our way to report, because in the state of Texas, we are all mandated reporters. So if any one of those categories discloses any abuse, it doesn't have to just be sexual, really any form of abuse, please call that Texas Department of Family Services, and you'll be able to access the Adult Protective Services, which is for our elder population. So again, thank you for tuning in to our coffee talk on sexual assault and special populations. If this brought up any questions or reasons that you might need some help or ways to get help, please contact us or any of these hotlines and websites, and they'll be able to help you out. But tune in next week to our coffee talk on Denim Day. We will be doing that on Monday. So that will be the last coffee talk of the month, but please tune in. And we also are offering our free training on April 28th on consent. So if that's something that you've seen on our posts and you're interested in, please register for that. We have the ways to register on our Instagram, as well as our Facebook, and as well as our website. So please reach out if you have any questions. I appreciate you tuning into our coffee talk, and thank you for participating and in Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and continue to wear teal for the rest of the month. But thank you all for listening in, and we hope to see you back soon. Thank you.